Whenever I see a beautiful bed of flowers, I have to ask, how did somebody do that? What makes that garden look so nice? Well, here on the Wisconsin Gardener, we hope to answer those questions, and we hope to help Wisconsin gardeners like you cultivate your own success stories. I'm Shelley Ryan, master gardener and gardening enthusiast, and I'll be your host as we show you some success stories that should work in your backyard. We'll concentrate on gardening in Wisconsin. No secrets about how to grow a banana tree or raise pineapples. Just basic, down-to-earth information that will work from Ashland to Beloit. On tonight's program, we're going to look at perennials, how to grow them, when to divide, and how to deal with some unwelcome visitors to your backyard. Olbrich Gardens on the east side of Madison has graciously allowed us to use their perennial beds to show you some examples that you can duplicate in your backyard. Although the setting here is beautiful, we're not here for a tour. It's time to dig into the garden, get our hands dirty, and share some practical information. And at our first stop, I have a surprise for you. It may surprise you, what you're looking at is actually part of the rock garden at Olbrich Gardens in Madison, Wisconsin. It's not necessarily a desert arid condition, and that's why we wanted you to see some of the plants here. I'm talking with Dr. Astrid Nieuwenhuis, horticulturist with the University of Wisconsin Extension. And Astrid, you're going to show us how we can duplicate some of this at home today. My first question, because I want to take it home and I want to plant it in my own backyard, is where do I start? Or maybe a better way to say it is, what's under this?
Well, let's take a look.
Okay, should I just dig a hole here?
Yeah.
Okay.
On top there's pea gravel, which is used as a mulch to keep the soil moisture in. And underneath there's some really sandy, light soil. It's very well drained soil in a rock garden. Feel that gritty sand in there.
Well, it's surprising. It rained earlier this morning, and this is already pretty dry, so I take it drains real well.
And rock garden plants have to tolerate drought.
Well, I know that this area is not watered, so they must be very drought tolerant because it's been kind of a dry summer.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what is this beautiful purple-blue plant in front of us?
This is campanula, or bellflower, and it also comes in white. Right here is a sample of what it looks like after it has flowered.
Basically, that's a dead flower head.
That's a dead flower head. It's producing seed now in there. And what you want to do in your garden is remove that dead seed head like that.
Why?
The reason you want to do that is because if you remove the dead seed heads, the plant will put more of its energy into producing more flowers.
Oh,
it will
really?
flower longer.
Oh, so longer and possibly more flowers.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, another reason why you want to do that is because you want to prevent the seeds from proliferating themselves all around the rock garden, and then you would end up with campanulas everywhere.
Which might be nice, but I know things can root real easily in this type of soil. Okay, and I see something in front of it that I'm not familiar with at all.
This is a boxwood, and this is pretty interesting because it's an evergreen plant, but it's not a needle-bearing evergreen. It's a broadleaf evergreen plant.
Meaning it stays green in the winter?
It stays green all winter. It's not this bright in the winter. It forms more of a grayish or brown cast to it.
Okay.
But that gives winter interest to the rock garden.
Sure, when other things are dead. Well, now, all of this looks so well established. This about
gorgeous?
5 years old?
Yeah, this is a 5-year-old rock garden.
And these were single plants, or is this a bunch of plants here?
This was planted as one plant.
Oh,
and that's something to keep in mind. Look how large it's gotten in 5 years. People tend to crowd their plants when they plant a rock garden.
I think
you don't want that.
It's a common mistake, and I've made it many times myself.
The other thing to keep in mind is that every single one of these plants here does well in Wisconsin.
Oh, good. Okay, that was going to be a question. That's important, I think. And then this one.
Well, this is that campanula again, and next to it we have sedum, the bright yellow flower and a fleshy, succulent leaf. Even if the flower was gone here, you would have a nice landscape interest with that glossy, light green leaf.
Now these come in, I've seen taller ones that I think we're also sedum.
Yeah,
Do they
there's a red one or maroon one called Autumn Joy, which is about that high. There's tiny little leafed sedums, also with the yellow flower. There's lots and lots of sedums.
And they would work well in this area too,
yes.
the short little ones. And I've been dying to touch this all morning.
Isn't this nice?
From a distance it looks like it would be thorny, but it's really
it's really furry.
Yeah, soft and silky.
It's not
even.
thorny at all.
And
you just want to pet it.
Yes.
This is Artemisia, or silver mound.
And that also, I think, is sometimes good in the winter. I've seen something like this where it just stays kind of a dull silver.
Right.
Okay. And now, see, this is neat.
Oh yeah, look what's happening here. Here's those tiny bell flowers which must have seeded themselves from this campanula right next to it.
So this is why you deadhead.
That's why deadhead.
Okay.
But I think this is a nice effect with those little bellflowers there. Look how thin the soil is. Isn't that amazing?
It's incredible something can root there. There's nothing to root.
Yeah. Rock garden plants tend to excavate a large area of soil. The roots go into crevices in the rock looking for water and nutrients.
So they're real determined.
They're determined.
Okay.
There's some hens and chicks there.
Okay, that's just... Okay, well, and this, okay, now this, I know very little about these. It's a juniper of some sort, though, isn't it?
Oh, this is, again, really good for winter interest. This is a horizontal creeping juniper called blue rug. And I think this is just a gorgeous plant. Horizontal junipers are native to Wisconsin.
Oh, really?
So
now,
they
this is
do
one
really
plant
well
again,
here.
too?
Yeah, this is one plant,
So
a
this
5-year-old
is
plant.
the effect you would get after 5 years of growth.
What I think is really gorgeous about this is, see how it cascades over the rock? I think that's so
lovely.
beautiful. Now,
That's
if
nice.
this were on soil, this shoot, if it, instead of being rock like this, if this were on soil, there would be some adventitious root buds forming right there, and the plant would root itself into the soil.
So it would just keep going.
Right.
Well, I have to admit, I'm guilty. When we saw that rock a minute ago, I brought one because I'm dying of curiosity to see how we could actually plant a living plant in a solid rock. So I brought the rock, and I think we have a plant that should
There
work.
it is, your
Now,
hens and chicks.
This is appropriate for this, right?
That's a perfect plant for a rock garden.
And that's a hens and chick.
That's a hens and chicks.
I take it this is the hen,
And
that's
there's
the
the
chick. Okay.
Now you need some soil.
Okay. Just this gravelly
Here,
soil
we'll
again. Okay. Now should I
Soil
set him
mixed
down?
with gravel. And what you want to do is cover those roots with
Okay.
soil. Remove some of those bigger rocks. We'll put them on top. And you want to be sure that every single one of those tiny little roots are covered, because if part of the root is exposed above the soil surface, then that will act as a wick for soil moisture, and it will dry out that plant.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take this and I'm going to find a place to plant it because I think this is really cute. Estrid, I want to thank you for joining me today. I think we've had
You're
enough.
welcome.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed this. And I think we're going to move to someplace that's a little shadier. I think we've had a little bit too much sun. And I'm going to go and join Jim Schrader in the hosta garden where we're going to talk about some shade-loving plants. First of all, I think you and I should find a place to plant my, well, what would you call this? A pocket rock garden.
Pocket rock garden.
Hostas come in a wide variety of shapes, sizes, and color. I'm talking with Dane County Extension horticulturist Jim Schrader, and we're in the hosta garden in the cool shade, and we're going to take a look at how you can use hostas in your own backyard garden.
Yes, Shelley, we have several interesting hostas here today that really shows the variations that they have. This first light green colored one is called August Moon, and it really has a different kind of leaf. It's kind of a rippled type of effect to it, so it has a different texture leaf, plus the light green color is substantially different probably than any other color you'd have in your garden.
Well, it's a much brighter leaf than I would expect for a hosta. I'm surprised.
Oh,
and
yes.
The one in front of it, however, is completely different. It's a deeper green, and what would you call it, more of a smooth one.
Yes, a smooth, shiny leaf, and you'll notice that the leaf here is so much smaller than the leaf we looked at the previous one.
That's called invincible. Now, these two seem to be used in sort of a ground cover. Is that correct?
Yes, right. That's probably one of the common ways hostas are used as a ground cover, where you just make a mass planting of them. And in the shade, we're always looking for something for a lot of color and to cover the area. And hostas is one of the real good possibilities for a ground cover in that area.
Well, then in front of that one, we've got a blue-green one that's an example of an individual planting. That one is one of my favorites. And now that's called halcyon. I think it's just gorgeous.
Yes, to use it as an individual plant, that's another use of hostas, and something that many could consider in their flower garden as well.
Well, now this one in front of it, this is rhodofolia, and I understand you're going to show me how to divide this so that I can use this in other parts of the garden or if it gets crowded.
Yes, many times they do get crowded, and hostas, like most other perennials, need to be periodically divided. Now, we've gone ahead and lifted this with a fork here earlier, and I do recommend a fork over a shovel, so there's a lot less root damage. But if you take a close look at this, there's actually several crowns, several growing points on the plant, and each one of those can then be divided into a separate plant. And this one is coming apart already here, and
So this is a separate plant.
That's a separate plant.
Okay.
Well, we've got lots more possibilities here. As we break this gently apart, I think we can do this probably without a knife or anything to bring these apart, being sure that we do get a section of root with each one as we go along.
And then each of these can be individually planted.
So what started out to be only one plant, now we've really got several plants.
At least 4 there.
And probably this one can be divided as well again.
Okay.
But usually then we'll put one back in the area that we dug the original plant. We want to keep our garden kind of intact. So one can go back here and it still gives us, in this case, probably 3 or 4 plants that can go to someone else.
That we can give to a friend even.
That's right. We can spread them around a little.
Okay, now this looks similar to the one being used right here. Now this is an example of using hostas as a border plant?
Yes, right. That's probably the third most common use of the hostas, and that's to use them as a border planting. You can see them used around the base of the tree here, or the other possibility is along the edges of the garden.
Okay, and then now over here I'm seeing a much more crowded area. Are there problems with crowding your hostas like this?
Yes, once they get too crowded, I mean that is when the potential is there to divide them. This one is flowering, so probably don't want to divide it right now.
Okay.
But some of the problems in addition to the crowding, if we're ever going to have any of the insect or other pest problems, that's when they start to show up.
And I think I see it.
Yes, we sure do.
Okay.
Probably the most common problem of hostas is slugs, and we're starting to see some damage. And when on the leaf you see the damage, the chewing of the leaf in the center part of the leaf, as compared to other damage that sometimes occurs along the edges, the first thing I would look for in this situation would be for slugs.
And they usually hide
Underside of the leaf.
Okay.
That's where you're going to find them, especially during the day. They're usually hiding, whether it's under the leaf or in the mulch underneath. That's where they're going to be found.
Okay, now how do I get rid of them? I don't want these in my garden.
Okay, there's several possibilities, but one of the real common ways to handle a slug problem, just kind of an old home remedy that works really well, a shallow dish or tray, and the only thing in here that attracts them and kills them, and that's just a beer in the tray. And the yeast smell of that will attract the slugs into that, and it's just a matter of going in and periodically emptying the slugs out and probably putting fresh beer in. But you can certainly cut your population that way.
Oh, that's good to know. I think I'm going to have to remember that one. Now, obviously, though, that this hosta is very healthy, so apparently we only have to worry when they get really carried away or when we see more damage. From here, though, I want to thank you for your help with the hostas. I'm definitely going to go out and get rid of my slugs. And I'm going to go and join Astrid Nieuwenhuis in another traditional perennial bed where we're going to hear a lovely story about a very old type of plant. Now this is one of my favorite plants. This is lamb's ears, and it has a very interesting story that goes with it. Back in the olden days, the leaves were given to little children before the Sunday church services, and they would put it in their Bible or in their prayer book, and then they would have something to play with during the service if they got sleepy or cranky. The reason why is because it's very soft and fuzzy. I suppose it was kind of like giving them a stuffed animal to play with. And so that's one of the reasons I like it. It's a very nice plant to play with for myself, too. And joining me again is Astrid Nieuwenhuis. And Astrid, the first thing I notice is that we've got plants here that we saw earlier. Isn't this campanula?
Yeah, that's campanula, which in the rock garden we saw in the blue shade, and here it is in white.
Okay, and behind it again is the Artemisia.
Right, silver mound.
Okay, so obviously these are very versatile plants and can be used not just in a rock garden, but here too. Okay, in an August garden, such as this one, I look around and I think, great time to just sit back and have my iced tea. There aren't things a Wisconsin gardener has to do in August, are there?
Well,
I think I know the answer to this.
One thing you should be doing in August is taking stock. Go to your garden with a notebook, a pen.
Oh, really?
Look at everything. Here's the time when you'll be able to see every plant and to make decisions about what to keep, what to move. Perhaps you have blank spaces that you want to fill in.
To make your plans for the spring and for, for dividing plants and things like that then.
Notice what works and what doesn't work.
Okay, well, what does work here now?
I think one thing that works in this garden is that it's framed by the 2 willows in each corner, and also by the backdrop of that fence.
Well, and a lot of people have fences like that, so I would think that'd be something very easy to play with.
And in fact, a lot of people might even have not willows, but they might have a lilac, for example, in each corner, or they might already have a crabapple tree.
Something to
in
frame
the yard,
the piece with. Well, okay, one thing I notice is this tall grass-like thing. I don't think it's a grass, but...
That is Siberian iris.
Okay.
And the flowers are gone. They were earlier. But what it's, the focal point that it's providing now is it gives this nice vertical, crisp, clear texture, upright leaf texture.
So it's still interesting even though the flowers are gone.
I think it's a really nice focal. Look at how it just bends in the wind like that.
That's beautiful.
So that's another success story of this garden is texture.
And then you've got something next to it that's totally different.
Yeah, that yellow lily there has a triangular, more horizontal leaf texture, which I think complements with the vertical upright of the iris right next to it.
Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, what's in front looks softer and floppier.
Right, that's a more floppy, open texture. And
what is this?
This is a yarrow, the ptarmigan yarrow. It's kind of an unusual plant.
Okay, I usually think of the golden-headed yarrows when I think of yarrows.
Right, but this is the smaller one, the white one.
Okay, now if this was unusual, is there something else I might want to try to find if I wanted to use this type of...
In its place, you could use feverfew, for example,
Okay.
or one of the asters if you couldn't find this.
Sure. Okay, they would do nicely. You know, one thing I noticed as we come back down this way towards the front is we've got the silver of the lamb's ears and these lighter white colors, and then in the back it seems to get deeper and richer. Is that on purpose?
That's exactly right. It's what we're looking for is a sense of movement and motion in the garden.
Okay, and I see height too.
Starting with the low plants in front, taller plants towards the back, and also notice that there's a difference in color intensity. We've got this kind of dull but nicely textured lamb's ears here in the front, and then moving towards the back, there's brighter and brighter colors and a really intense combination of that dark blue delphinium and the yellow lily.
So the bolder colors you put in the back to draw the eye towards the back.
Yes, you're looking for a sense of motion.
Okay, I also noticed that the delphiniums really look like they're on their way out.
They are, and that's because perennials don't flower all summer as annuals do. They only flower for a few weeks at a time. So,
okay, so you need to plan ahead.
Right, that's something else to keep in mind is it's a succession of flowering times.
Okay, so somebody planned this then. There are blooms on the lilies as the delphiniums are fading.
Exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
Excellent. And then if we're talking about the succession of bloom coming back down in front of the iris, I've been wanting to ask you about this. It looks like it's starting to flower. I see a lot of buds on it. You've got to tell me, what is this?
Isn't that cool?
That's just wonderful.
That is platycodon, or balloon flower.
That makes sense. I think those look like little upside-down hot air balloons.
Yeah, don't they?
Okay, now coming from something like this is really late summer. How do you continue the succession of blooms?
So right away after the platycodon, which is just about going to flower now, you know, in full flower, the next thing would be this veronica or speedwell.
Now this
and
has
here's the flower buds on it.
Okay.
So they will follow the platycodon.
So it's getting ready to go.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, and here's what we started with.
Oh, really?
These are leaves from hyacinths, which bloomed the first thing in the spring.
Early in the spring.
That's the very first thing that bloomed.
We've almost come full circle right here.
Right.
Okay, now why is this all empty? Is there something in here?
Well, let's look at this. This bed, the edge of this mulch is 2 feet wide.
And is that
that
good?
That's to give space for the hyacinth bulbs under here.
Uh-huh.
And also because you want to get enough space away from the grass so that when you mow, you don't chop off your perennials.
I think I've had problems with that. That's a real good idea. Well, as long as we're down on the ground, I also have a question. These look like leaves. Is this a mulch?
Leaves. These are composted leaves acting as a mulch. And what the mulch does is it holds soil moisture. It also keeps weeds out.
So what other kind of things can you use for mulch?
Well, this is leaf compost. These are composted leaves which have been in a compost pile for over a year.
Now, you wouldn't want to use these fresh? Or?
No, don't use fresh leaves.
Okay.
You could also use grass clippings. You could use bark chips.
And there's cocoa beans, I've
Cocoa
heard of.
beans, right.
Okay. And what depth? I mean, thin, thick?
2 to 4 inches is the recommended depth for a mulch.
Okay, why is mulch so important?
Well, the main reason is that it gives early season weed control for low maintenance.
In other words, I don't have to weed as much.
Right,
I like
exactly.
it. Okay,
yeah.
I like it.
And the second reason is that it retains soil moisture.
Which during a dry summer like the one we've had is very important.
Yes.
Okay, well, you bring up another point that I've had a question about for a long time. Everything I read, everything I've heard says water, an inch of water a week.
Yeah, that's the rule of thumb.
Right, and if it doesn't rain an inch, then you're supposed to do it. And I've never figured out how I'm supposed to measure that.
Oh, that's easy.
Oh, good.
What you do is you take a container like this, a Tupperware or a cup or something, place it down in your garden, wait, turn on the sprinkler, wait half hour, hour, whatever, go back to the container and measure with a ruler the depth of that water, and that should be an inch.
And if it's got an inch, you're done.
Right.
I would assume with a dense bed like this, we would want to place maybe several containers to make sure we're getting all the spots.
Yes.
Okay, well, that is a lot easier than I expected. Thank you. That's a question I've had for a long time. We're going to go to Jim Schrader in just a sec to answer some more questions from Wisconsin gardeners. So if you have questions that we haven't gotten to yet, hang in there, because we're going to answer some more and hopefully give you some more tips on how to create your own garden success story. Astrid, I want to thank you for joining me. This has been really
welcome,
fun.
Shelley.
Before we go, I want to take one last look at this beautiful balloon flower.
Yeah, isn't that gorgeous?
Oh, I can think of hundreds of places to put it in my backyard. Welcome to the question and answer segment of our program. Jim Schrader has rejoined us and is going to answer some questions from Wisconsin gardeners. We've also been joined by two special guests. These are the topiary bears, and since they're so intimately involved with growing, we thought they'd be real experts to have along. The mama bear is covered with begonias and lobelias. It's really a pretty and creative effect. Before we get to the first question, Jim, I just wanted to backtrack to the balloon flower that we just talked about. If you're interested in planting it, there's 2 points to remember. It needs moist, well-drained soil, so you should probably mulch around it, and it comes up very late in the spring. So put a stake there when you plant it, so that when you plant something else later, you don't plant on top of it. And be patient. It may not come up until June. Other than that, it should be a beautiful plant in your backyard. Okay, Jim, the first question I've got here is from Milwaukee County. This person is asking, when is it okay to transplant peonies and iris?
Okay, just like we talked about with the plants this morning, the peonies and iris, like all the other perennials, have to be periodically dug, divided, and reset. And the peonies are done in the fall, quite late in the fall. September, I even like to do it like into October. It's probably my favorite time. So that's when you've got ahead of you. The iris, I suspect a lot of the people have already done the iris, divided it.
Some of us.
Right. The recommended time, at least, is right after they're done flowering.
Right.
So their early spring flowering plants are right after that. However, the iris are really tough, and if you don't have it done, it still could be done at this point of the summer.
Good. That's a chore I'll have to do, I think. Okay, we also have from Eau Claire County a question about powdery mildew on phlox, and I think you brought in an example of powdery mildew.
Yes, this example is on delphinium, but it's a good example of powdery mildew. It was brought in by Ann Munson from Monona, and in this case the powdery mildew, the fungus itself is along the stem, and then it goes on out to the flowers, and many times the fungus will also be on the foliage.
This gray stuff here.
The gray, white, powdery material that's on there is really on the outside of the stem.
How do we fix it?
Well, the first thing to fix is to prevent it, and many of the new varieties, especially phlox, many of the new selections of phlox are, well, if not completely resistant, at least they tolerate it better, and there's not nearly as much of a problem. So if you're looking for new plants, say for next year, to buy one of these more resistant varieties is probably the easiest solution to it. But otherwise, just good cultural practices.
Meaning not crowding, I bet.
Yeah, the proper spacing is very, very important. You know, we all take it for granted, but we don't want weeds in there, because that too is going to make the airflow not as good. We want the air movement there, that after the rain or after the dew in the morning, that it dries off as quickly as possible. And once it dries, then we don't get the fungus, in this case the mildew, starting to grow.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, then I also have a question again from Ann Munson. This is a problem with stalk borer.
Stalk borer, right. Again, back to the delphinium here. We've had a stalk borer problem. And even though our example is on delphinium, and you can see where it is gone, and it's actually gone the long way in the stem there, and this larger hole probably is where the borer actually came out. But everything above that point, it's very brittle, it breaks off, and it dies. Once you find it, the damage is usually done.
So how do you stop it?
Okay, really stopping prevention is the answer. And this is a pest of many of our vegetable garden plants, any of the thick stem plants, and it tends to come from weedy areas.
So
if
keep
you-
the weeds away as the
Yeah,
first step.
along the fence row, little weed patches close to the flower bed.
Okay.
Clean them up and you should have a minimum of problem with the borer.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you again for joining us and helping us with these questions. If you have questions, in a moment we will give you some more information about how you can begin to answer the questions from your own backyard. Gardening and learning seem to go hand in hand. I want to thank Ustrid and Jim for providing us with some very helpful information about growing perennials. If you have questions about your own backyard, contact the University of Wisconsin Extension County Extension agent in your area who will help you find information to answer your questions. If you're planning a trip to Madison in the near future, be sure to visit Olbrich Gardens. Our thanks again to the staff here for all their help. The Wisconsin Gardener is something of an experiment for us. We'd like to know what you think about the program, either by phone or postcard. I hope we've answered a few of your gardening questions. If not, join us again in 2 weeks, August 24th, when we'll be live in our studio with Ustrid, Jim, and other experts from UW Extension Cooperative Extension on an open phone line. So hold your questions until then and call during the program. Well, I'm going to go check the slug trap. See you in 2 weeks.